Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim.
Oh. Well, I guess eventually it had to happen. We had to convene in the flesh. We had to really get each other's touch and sense in here, and yeah, what a movie to do it with.
Yes, what a scent that is coming from Tim. This is a horror movie podcast. We get together, we talk about a horror film, and on this episode we will be talking about Halloween Ends, which is the final part of this modern Halloween trilogy.
Let's admit it, it's the final part of this modern Halloween trilogy.
I think I did just admit that, yes.
As long as we're admitting it, yeah.
Yeah, we are admitting it, yes. We'll start spoiling.
Evil ends tonight.
Well, they said that about the last one. But yes, we'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you warning before we get to spoilers. Now, forewarning for Halloween Kills, we went 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So we'll see how this goes. But brace yourselves, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. If you have to go to the bathroom, go now. Because you're not going to want to stop in the middle to take a wee or poo.
No, you are not. I think normally, I start with the premise of the movie, and I'll do what I can here. But I feel like a lot of this premise is a spoiler.
Yeah, this is super tough to do non-spoilery.
Which I guess is to admit that this film isn't a typical Halloween movie. It's got other things going on.
As long as we're admitting it, it's not a typical Halloween movie.
We're admitting a lot to it, apparently.
It's confession time.
Welcome to Horror Movie Confessionals. So, there won't be much of a premise.
I don't know.
Why did you just do that?
I don't know if people can tell, but this is the first time we've been in the same room together. So usually we record separately because I live at home and you live, I'm not quite sure.
In Scotland.
France or okay.
Scotland. It's Scotland.
That's what that accent is.
Yes.
I thought Caribbean. I don't know.
Caribbean. Oh, all right. So, yeah, I think, we can't really talk about the premise too much. We can give our general feelings of this final part. Obviously, if you go back,
we can have general feelings of each other because we can feel each other.
I'm sure we will. All right.
Yeah. So we actually went to the theater together to see this.
We did. We saw this in the theater together.
Pete did his famous popcorn trick for me.
This is going to be a long episode. Yes. We went to the theater together. I got to see Nicole Kidman tell me that AMC make movies better. That was a delightful experience.
She's like watching Jurassic World. Actually, I do quite like the commercial. I just think they need better movies. Like, you can't be that have that much gravitas when the stuff you're watching is like Jurassic World and like Wonder Woman and stuff.
Yeah, I think La La Land might be the most prestigious movie that was in this. I don't know. Right, I think first things first. Right?
And actually, and let's be honest, they should change it up for Halloween. Like, that should be Michael Myers walking into the theater. like still have Nicole Kidman's voice, but just have it Michael Myers.
Well, I was going to ask because Michael Myers traditionally doesn't talk much. He's a doer, not a sayer. One might say.
It's a man of action.
One could say that, yes.
Yeah.
So first things first, just to recap our feelings on these modern Halloween movies. Halloween 2018, we were both highly disappointed with. Neither one of us liked it very much, which was documented heavily in the review at the time, which was like an hour 40 minutes. Then the 2 hour 40-minute review of Halloween Kills was a wild ride in that it's a terrible movie, but it's at least a funny terrible movie with a lot of interesting weird things to talk about.
There's definitely a lot to talk about, yeah.
Yeah. And I think the main thing I want to say getting into the start of this discussion is that I think I said at the end of that review that the worst thing this third movie could be at this point, because after the craziness of Kills, even though it wasn't good, I was hoping that at least it'd be crazy again, that there'd be some interesting stuff to talk about. And the worst thing it could be would be just a dull, bad movie. I think it's safe to say they gave us a whole new slate of things to talk about that are crazy in their own ways. So, yeah, it's set a few years after because the last two were the same night, and then this one is like there's a scene at the start which is the following year, and then I assume it's present day the rest of the movie.
I guess so. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, or close to it if not.
Yeah.
But and obviously Jamie Lee Curtis is back. And the granddaughter's back, Allison. But yeah, so we'll get into things. But
Lindsay Wallace is back.
Lindsay Wallace has got a small cameo again. Yes. So. No, well, we can't talk about the premise. The premise is spoiler. It's complete spoiler territory. So I will just ask the question. Tim, how did you feel about Halloween Ends?
So I do have to admit I did so I actually have seen this twice. I watched it on Friday with my wife.
You bitch.
No, I'm sorry. Hey, I actually wanted to see it. What am I gonna say? No.
You're saying no. This is Peter territory.
Yeah.
Your wife. That's Peter. This is Peter territory. You have wife territory. Okay. I don't ask you for a handy, right? She doesn't
That's
ask
true.
you for Halloween Ends. Okay?
That's true. So I actually did see it, but yeah, I am glad that I saw it twice because, well, one, I enjoyed the company, and also the theater experience. It was a good, this is a good movie to see in the theater, especially the theater I went to. Is very comfortable, had nice big wide seats, a little table, you could put your candy on.
And it was a Dolby theater, so the bass was absolutely booming.
Yeah, I was like, oh, good for that elf from Harry Potter to open up a theater.
That was Dobby.
It was close enough. I'm sorry, I'm not a Harry Potter nerd like you.
A big Harry Potter fan, I am.
But no, I'm glad that I got to see it twice. So my thoughts on it, I am super duper surprised that I'm saying this because again, the first one didn't really like. I think some people act like they have like a fondness for that 2018 one, and I don't know. I just think it's like kind of boring and generic. Like it's like not really anything special. And then Halloween Kills was just so crazy and all over the place. But it's a bad movie, and then it's one that I had a lot of fun watching it the first time with my initial reactions, and then talking to you was a blast just to get like all our thoughts and stuff out there because it was so crazy. But then I rewatched it before this movie, and it's kind of a slog when you go back and watch it.
It's a long movie. It's like over 2 hours, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just not super fun. So I definitely didn't have high hopes for this movie, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I kind of liked it. I'm not gonna say it's a good movie. I think it definitely has plenty of flaws, but I am gonna say I do admire like the big swings it takes. Like there are definite things in this movie that I did not expect or see coming at any point. So watching it was like was actually like pretty exciting, being like, okay, like where are you going with this? And then watching it a second time, I actually did appreciate some like little things that they set up, and just being like, oh, hey, like just like something they would show like a shot of that'll be like, oh, I know that's gonna like play an important part coming up. And I again, it's hard to get into specifics, without getting spoilery, but I like what they do with some of the characters. I will say what I like about this movie is the big swings and new directions that it takes. I think where it falters for me is when it goes back to the same old Laurie versus Michael storyline that they have been doing this whole trilogy. Like that stuff just doesn't really do a ton for me, and it just feels like same kind of boring tired territory. But when they are doing the new stuff, that like I do kind of perk up, and I don't know, it felt different and interesting to me. So that's kind of where I'm landing.
Yeah.
And I want to say we saw this together at the theater. And we did not talk about it at all because we didn't want to know the opinion. So I have no idea where you're gonna come from this. Honestly, I can see you going either way. So I'm very interested. There are definitely some times in the theaters where you did get a look on your face like, what the hell just happened? But I don't know if that was in a good way or not. So I guess we'll find out soon.
Okay, this is a complex series of thoughts to figure out. Much like Halloween Kills, there are several times in this movie where I basically burst out laughing because
yes,
there are moments that are very hammy or so overacted or over directed that they are become super silly. There's a lot of like a character will say or do a thing and then it'll linger on a reaction shot that then the reaction shot would make me laugh. It happened multiple times. There's, I think the ending, and by the ending I mean like the last 15-20 minutes, I think that sucks.
I'm not gonna disagree.
Yeah, and when we get into spoilers we could talk about the specifics of that and what's actually interesting about that opinion, because I do think there's like an interesting caveat to saying that. I don't think the execution is typically that great, but I'm going to say something bold here, Tim.
Okay, here we go. It's what people want to see.
From a conceptual level, I will say that this is the best of the three movies.
Sure, okay.
Because it is daring to do something different. It is daring to do something new. I don't think it always like pulls off what it's trying to do. But at the very least, I'm like, well, there's an interesting idea here. Sure. And I'm kind of, you know, like, I actually think they chickened out by the, like...
I'll agree with that, yeah.
The ending, I felt chickened out of the premise. Because the premise, I thought, was, okay, this is different. This is trying to do something new, for the most part, with the franchise. And I could kind of get behind the idea of it. I do think that the way the characters talk about the main themes and the main story that's going on often felt forced, and it felt like they were jumping to... It was the same thing with Kills, where, you know, you used to have characters starting to monologue about what Michael Myers is and evil's dying tonight and all that. Like everything would turn into like these over-the-top character monologues. Yeah. And there's kind of that thing in this. I mean, you know, Jamie Lee Curtis has like a narration because she's writing a book at the start of the movie, and it's just like, oh, what is evil? Evil's this, evil's that, and I'm trying to be a normal woman now with my my house and my laundry.
What I think is interesting about this trilogy is like each movie does have like very specific themes that they are obviously trying to tackle, but I don't but I honestly like can't, like, I think it's very obvious to be like, oh yeah, like the first movie they're looking at this, and like the second movie they're looking at this, and this movie they're looking at this, but I can't tell from the movie what they're ultimately trying to say. Like and like we'll get more to it in like spoiler territory, but like with this one, like I was like, okay, I know I
thought this movie was going to have something to say, and then it kind of diverted paths.
Yes,
very very quickly at a certain point. So, which is my big problem with the last 20 minutes. Like I thought a lot of moments felt goofy and silly and hammy is the best word I can use to describe it. But I kind of appreciated the wild like direction it was trying to take it in a way that I think at least, you know, in concept worked better than say what Halloween 6 tried to do with like, oh, Michael, you know, controlled by a cult bullshit. Like it's not that. But it is kind of a bold thing because as the movie starts and like the entire cold open before the titles play, it's like, okay, what is this? This doesn't feel like a Halloween movie.
Yeah, I really like the cold opening. I think it is very like interesting and bold, if I may say so.
As you may.
But well, let me ask you this question, and I forget, I might have asked you in the other movie discussions too, but you're very much a bigger Halloween fan than me. I mean, I like the franchise. You know, I think the first one obviously is a stone cold classic, and then, you know, a lot of the sequels are diminishing returns, but there are some that are fun. But like it's never been like my franchise. Like it's never been the one that I was like, oh yeah, like I grew up watching it and loving it, and like, oh, I identify with Michael Myers so much, like, you know, like you do. And then
I don't know if I've ever said that part,
but so like, I don't know, like when they, you know, they're doing a new movie, like, do you want to see something like this that is going in like crazy bold new directions, or do you just want like them to do a very standard boilerplate sequel where it's just like, here, it's slasher, it's Michael, he's killing people?
Here's the thing, like, there's too many nostalgia sequels today, and Halloween 2018 in its own way is a nostalgia sequel. But I don't think I'd have had much of a problem with that if I thought the direction was good for the type of movie Halloween's supposed to be. My problem with that movie was that the pacing was off, the kills felt off. It didn't move like a Halloween movie.
I think especially like in Kills, like you're making the point that it's like John Wick, Michael Myers.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But having said that, like I think if it's ever going to be a great movie again, if you're going to have a sequel, that it has to shake things up and it has to kind of like put its own definitive stamp on it and maybe kind of reinvent it in a way, that kind of takes it forward and honors what it was, but does something different with it.
Yeah.
Like I think there's potential in that, and I think the core concept of what this movie tries to do is a good idea for that.
Okay.
But execution is what it is, and then totally abandoning it for the ending is another thing entirely. So
there you go.
So that's about that. What do we say without spoilers? Really, I mean, because it's so everything's spoilery.
Yeah.
I know.
I don't know.
Like I feel like like some things feel rushed in the movie. I'd say that
for sure.
And that goes hand in hand with a hammy complaint, where some moments feel like just like we rushed to a character realizing something to get it going, but it doesn't feel natural and therefore feels a bit goofy and whatnot. So yeah, I still don't think David Gordon Green's a good director for this kind of movie. Like his comedy work, at least from TV, I think is fine.
Yeah,
but for a horror movie, tackling serious themes and trying to say something about evil, I don't know.
I mean, I could be wrong, but I do think, is this the first movie where they had like additional writers on it? Because I think the other ones were just Danny McBride and David Gordon Green. This one has actually a couple of different people. They're credited as writers too, but
I don't actually know off the top of my head.
But I mean, I one thing I think that's kind of interesting is that if that is true, then I just wonder if because I do think David Gordon Green is like a good director, but I just wonder if maybe he's not the person that should be shepherding the story. Like maybe with a different script, and I don't know, maybe the stuff that's good about this, I don't know if part of it is welcomed by the new writers or something. But yeah, I just wonder maybe what this trilogy would look like, maybe if someone else was helming the story or something.
Because I think, going back to what you asked before about, do you want just a copycat sequel that's decent but fun? And that's kind of what Halloween 4 is, and I love Halloween 4 for the fun thing that it is. Or do you want something ambitious and new that does something different? I can want that. I think some people would argue that's what Rob Zombie's movie is. I would say no, it's not.
No.
But what I would say is that I think if you want it to be special again, you have to do something new. You have to do something that feels like it rejuvenates everything because it has a new take on a new idea.
Yeah.
And I think the idea in this is good. I just think that the execution is not always up to par. There's a lot of bad characters and wonky decisions being made and things being shoved down our throats with slow motion and other things like that.
Yeah, I definitely don't disagree with that. But I think the new directions and ideas and stuff that it goes into for me was more enjoyable, so it kind of outweighs it let me get past some of the less favorable stuff too. And I don't want to sound like I love this movie, like it's not like, oh my god, this is one of my new favorite horror movies. It's just, especially when compared to the other two movies in this trilogy, it's like, oh wow, this is pretty good versus the other ones, which were kind of dog shit. Not to be mean.
Yeah, I would say it's the best of the three. And part of that is because it isn't just trying to be Halloween again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we have to just give the spoiler warning so we can actually talk about everything. So, full spoilers for this point on. For Halloween Ends, you have been warned. And I'm going to start off this with a statement I would not have expected to make about this.
Okay.
And I'll elaborate after to what I mean for this, especially if you've not seen the movie and you're going into the spoiler section just waiting to hear about what it is.
Weirdo.
Some people don't watch it. My biggest complaint of this movie, obviously I can talk about some goofy moments in the writing and acting and direction, but my biggest complaint is that Michael Myers should not have been in this movie.
Oh no, yeah, no, I agree. That's like what I was saying before, is like the stuff where it always falters to me is when it's going back to Laurie and Michael and stuff.
Yeah, because this is the thing. You see Michael a few times throughout the film, but I was positive that he wasn't really there. I thought it was in a character's head.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I know, and we'll get to like where I'm getting that from in a bit, but I thought the Michael we saw for most of the movie was in a character's head. He wasn't really there. He was truly and utterly just mysteriously vanished. They say that he disappeared after the end of the last movie, and they don't know where he is, and that's part of the mystery of the shape. Right? Cool. But then the last 20 minutes, like this new character that we've built up the whole movie, Corey. The whole movie's about this guy named Corey who's becoming the new shape. That is the plot of this movie. That someone new who is in an unfortunate accident, it starts to become this source of evil and become the new shape, which is a really interesting idea for a Halloween movie, a Halloween sequel. But it's only been a few hours since we watched it, but as try as I can, I cannot fathom what Michael, like, or even not even that, what Laurie, because it's Laurie really who kills him. Well, Laurie killing him.
And then, Laurie killing Corey? Or...
Yeah, Laurie killing Corey, and then switching to Michael showing up again just so that Michael and Laurie can have a face-off.
Yeah.
To me, that felt so tacked on because the movie up until that point was not about Laurie versus Michael.
Not at all, no.
The trailer was about that, and it turned out almost of that trailer was from the end of the movie because most of the movie isn't that.
Yeah.
I can't fathom, like, what does this last 15 minutes do to end the story the rest of the movie was telling?
I mean, I hate to even bring it up, but like, I mean, this does feel like the same kind of bullshit that you saw in like the Star Wars sequel trilogy, where it's like you have these interesting new characters, but at the end of the day, they always have to pull back and go, but whoa, here's Emperor Palpatine again. He's a bad guy. You gotta fight him, and it's like, no, like you have this super interesting new character, and then it's just like the last 15 minutes or so, it's like, oh no, wait, this is a Halloween movie, like bring in Michael Myers.
It just felt like the movie wasn't about that at all, so it felt like a total betrayal of the rest of the film, and I'm like, we've been building up this character the whole time, and he's just gone now, and I felt like his story didn't have a satisfying conclusion. Didn't feel like it made some big point that Laurie got to kill him.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the what I was kind of bringing up before too, is like I think it's really interesting what they're doing with the character, and I feel like a lot of the movie is trying to look at this idea of like cycles of violence, of how like, what happens when, you have this person who, essentially is a good person, but it's almost like a metaphor for like, I don't know, cancel culture or something, like where like, if people start treating him this certain way, what happens to this kind of person? But then ultimately you think like, okay, if that's what you're saying, then like you want some kind of like redemptive thing where like he redeems himself in the end or something, but instead it is just kind of like, no, like they're a bad person, they messed up and now they're dead.
I was okay with them being evil and like just being the new shape, but like I thought that was maybe going to be the point of the movie, is that there'll always be a new pure evil. There'll always be that'll always be around, even if it's not Michael Myers with the mask on. It'll be someone else with the mask on. The idea that it's this immortal thing.
And then, even in like the book she's writing, she like specifically says like at the end or whatever, like evil never dies, it just changes shape, which would be a great metaphor for Corey in this instance. But then it's like
he's already dead.
Yeah, it's like, but no, Michael Myers does come back, so it didn't change shape. It's the same guy.
Yeah, and maybe, I mean, they did sort of definitively kill Michael at the very end. We'll talk about all that.
See. Halloween Begins, like the next movie. He's just like all stitched up like Chucky and Bride of Chucky.
I mean, he was basically put into a blender. I don't think he's coming back from that. I mean, not that I'm saying there won't be another Halloween starring Michael Myers, because there will be. It'll just be another reboot or another something.
Well, this time it'll be like, these are the 2018 kills and the storyline. The next one will be picking up from like part 4 and they're just going right into the new one.
That's the interesting thing about this whole idea of like a new character becoming the shape, is that's kind of the ending of 4, and I really like that ending. And it's just a sort of quick thing at the end to sort of say, oh, this new kid's going to grow up to be the next Michael, and I like that ending to 4. I think this movie kind of takes it and sort of like expands it on the idea that it's not a kid necessarily, it's actually someone who's just in a because the movie starts off, I mean, you don't get this till after the cold open, but you get this sort of montage that implies that Haddonfield, after Halloween 2018, which is the night that all this stuff happened in the first 2 movies, is the town was so paranoid and so scared of him coming back because no one knew where he went, that everyone was on edge, everyone was scared of something happening, they were looking for people to point fingers at and blame. So it's kind of bringing up paranoia and mass hysteria and things, and the last movie kind of tried to tackle that. Obviously the results were questionable, but it sets up this idea that this guy Corey, we introduced in the opening scene, he's there to babysit this kid and on Halloween night, and this is 2019, so it's a year after the last two movies.
It's like these rich parents, and they're going out to like this Halloween party, and they and he's not even a babysitter. They just hire like the guy that cleans their yard.
Yeah, I think they said they did the yard work for him, but the regular babysitter had to cancel, so he get called in. And he seems to get on well enough with the kid. He's shown him the Thing. Well, it's John Carpenter's The Thing, which is an interesting callback to the original movie because they watched the original Thing in that movie. But the kid likes to play little pranks, and he actually, disappears and scares Corey a little bit and locks him in this attic room where I don't know if Corey suffers from maybe either claustrophobia or something like that.
Well, the way I kind of took it is that, like you were kind of saying, this town is still so paranoid from Michael Myers, which makes sense because, again, like, I don't like kills, but, if we do have to accept that it is the reality of this, series, like, he killed so many people in that last movie that if he just disappears, like, okay, yeah, I probably would be a little scared too, especially, when the kid's playing it up and telling him, like, oh, Michael Myers is coming and he only kills babysitters and stuff. And it's
the 1 year anniversary of this massacre that killed a lot, Michael killed a lot of people in those two movies.
So I feel like it does make sense for him to get, like, especially if he's, someone that just is prone to being, a little scared or whatever, that, just being in this situation and having that in your head could, freak you out a little bit.
Yeah.
But also, like you were saying, like, who knows, he could be claustrophobic or something. Like,
but he starts to freak out and he's banging on the door. He's like, hey, let me out.
And I do just, and just to reiterate too, though, I actually really do like this opening scene. I thought this was directed pretty well. Like, there's a lot of, like, I don't want to say like misdirects, but there's lots of focuses on things like, you very clearly see him like going to grab a knife and then he sets it down and then it's not there again. And then as, the first time you're watching this, it is a lot of like, okay, when is Michael going to show up? I like that it's playing with these expectations. Like, I mean, I don't know, if you thought this, but the first time I watched it, I definitely was like, okay, where's Michael? He's like, we're really playing with, I
mean, I didn't, but not because, like, I probably would have done if I'd just watched the movie completely cold, but I'd heard that the movie up until the last 20 minutes was unconventional, so I was kind of like, in my head, I was thinking, okay, obviously you would think this is Michael, but I think it's something else because I know the movie's going to do something different. I didn't know what it was. I had no spoilers other than just it's different. That was all I knew. But he starts to kick down the door because he's getting scared, and as he's doing this, the parents are arriving home, so the car's pulling in outside. And when he eventually kicks the door open, the door hits the kid who's standing right outside the door still, and it pushes him over the edge of the banister. And this is a tall, like, 3-story house, something like that. So he basically falls to his death, and it's a pretty gruesome effect where you see the kid land. The parents see the kid land right down in front of them.
It's very quick, so I'm not sure exactly how he does it, but it looks like he does it in some way that like kind of like snaps his like spine back or like something like that like just makes it like a very extra like painful.
At least if not his spine, and certainly his neck. Like, there's definitely some snapping going on.
There's a lot of blood.
Yes. So it's this horrific thing where this guy Corey has accidentally killed this little shithead, and obviously he's taken in by the police, and we don't really know at this point like what the fallout of this is going to be. And at this point, I don't know this guy's going to be the main character, but he is. He's absolutely the main character of this movie. So we skip ahead to presumably present day Halloween, or well, it's not Halloween day yet, but it's like right before it.
Yeah.
And we're introduced to what he is now, and he is out. He's not been tried for murder because obviously it's established that it is accidental. And he is working as a mechanic, which kind of already tells you that his life is taking a different turn, because in the opening scene he's talking about applying to colleges and things like that.
Yeah, he's talking about how he wants to be an engineer, and this is so it was interesting on the second watch because knowing what happens and just being able to see how different he is in this opening scene versus the like later scenes. I thought like just a really good acting job, because in the opening scene he is very like, he's very likable, kind of like maybe like a nerdy guy, but like you can see like, oh, okay, like I like this guy. And then yeah, it's like he does, I think, a very good performance like afterwards, where you can just tell there's like this, hauntedness inside him, which is, I mean, which is very fair. Like, I don't know how, even though it is an accident, like that's something that will mess you up like terribly. Like, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's this traumatic thing. And he seems to be obviously be sadder, and he's clearly traumatized by what happened.
Yeah.
He's obviously, if you accidentally kill a kid, you take it kind of harshly. And it's funny because we see him at his work, and he's a mechanic. He's wearing dark blue overalls, and it's at that moment where I kind of went, I think I know what this movie's about to do. Like, it clicked him. Like, he's already kind of got the uniform of what Michael wears. So, it starts setting these things up. And we'll get some scenes out of order probably as we're talking about all his stuff. But, we see him be effectively bullied by a bunch of high school kids. Who,
the high school marching band.
Yeah, who recognize who he is and start pushing him. And this is when Laurie comes into the movie and kind of sticks up for him.
Yeah, which I think this movie really taps into, a much more real, tangible fear than just like the boogeyman like other movies did, which is the fear of an adult man being picked on by teenagers. that is terrifying.
Yeah, it's very interesting because like the idea that the evil, like Michael's fear that he's left behind, makes everyone kind of want to have a villain to blame because they couldn't get to him, so they blame it on him, and it in turn turns him into the new Michael. Is an interesting idea. It's an interesting concept. And
what I'll say is that I like that concept. The concept I don't like is the people that like blame Laurie.
Oh, yeah.
That was annoying to me.
Yeah, so there's a scene in the supermarket where she meets up with the sheriff from the last movie, and it's they had kind of a romantic like potential thing in the last movie, so they're kind of flirting and whatever. And she's in a good mood leaving the store, and then it turns out, the couple who were killed early on in Halloween Kills, it was the mixed race couple, the white man and the black woman. The black woman turns out survived, and she can't speak though because she gets stabbed in the neck with a bottle or something.
I think it was like a what do you call it, like a fluorescent light.
Oh yeah, it was a light tube. Yeah. So she's actually still alive. She's in a wheelchair and she can't talk, and she's just sitting there. And this woman's sister is like, "Hey, Laurie, you happy?" Because she sees her with a smile. Like, my sister's not happy. She can't speak because you antagonized that monster, and it's your fault. Yeah. And I'm like, what do you mean she antagonized?
Yeah, I don't get that at all.
He broke out of prison or broke out of the bus going from the mental hospital without ever knowing or caring about Laurie. That was part of the point of that movie, is that he didn't give a shit about Laurie.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure why it's her fault to anyone, but
and she's not like the only one that does it. Like other people in the town do it too. Like the mother, the mother of Corey at one point like accuses her of like the same thing, saying like, you picked on a young man with like mental disabilities or something. It's like, what are you talking about? That's not what happened at all.
Unless it's trying to say something about how
like victim blaming or something.
Yeah, victim blaming, or the idea that they're willing to forgive him even though he just stalked an innocent teenager once upon a time and tried to kill her. And deserves no sympathy whatsoever in any way. In fact, let's talk about Corey's mother right now, because we have to. Like, this is one of the worst characters in the movie because she's such a caricature, and it doesn't make any sense. Because Corey, they mention in the opening scene when he's applying for colleges, he's not actually right out of high school. He's 21. They mentioned that in the opening scene. So obviously, it's at least another 2 or 3 years later, he's like 23, 24, maybe 25 at a push, whatever the gap is. And there's a scene, because basically a lot of the plot of a lot of the movie is that he and Allison, Laurie's grandmother, have got a romantic interest, and they see something in each other.
It's kind of a romantic movie.
It was very romantic, yeah. And like, basically the mother's this very controlling character who's constantly telling them what to do. Maybe this is something that sort of came about after the arrest and the accidental murder. Maybe she's like extra protective or whatever, but she starts barking at him like in one of the first scenes she's in, because they're having dinner, and Corey gets a text from Allison saying, "Hey, there's this Halloween party, blah blah," and all he does is look down at his phone and type in something and puts it away, and the mother starts yelling, "Who is that you're talking to? Tell me right now." It's like, he's not 11. Why? It's not. It doesn't matter that he lives with you.
Yeah.
He is under no obligation to tell you who he talks to.
Yeah.
What is this? And she's like just this character who's so controlling. When she confronts Laurie later on, every time we see her with Corey, she's yelling.
It also seems like she's into him. She like kisses him on the lips.
Yeah, because at one point she, like, when she speaks to Laurie, she seems to be whatever about him dating Allison, but then when she talks to him later, she's like, oh, that girl's going to take you away from me, and she's just this, this caricature of the controlling evil mother who's, and I think it's a weak character in its performance and writing, but it's also just kind of weak because it's like, it's almost tapping into that Rob Zombie thing a little bit, where it's like, you know, maybe too much of a reason why he's messed up to give him a parent who's this. I mean, to be fair, the uncle character who lives with them seems to be quite nice to him and gives him.
I don't think they ever actually say who he is, but I assumed he was like a stepdad or something.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
I could swear like he called him uncle at one point. Okay. But I mean, regardless, the father figure in the equation.
But yeah, I mean, it's just it seems very unnecessary. Like, I think it's a more interesting idea to be like, all right, here's this guy who had everything going for him, and then he has this one accident and the town turns on him, and that's what causes him to become this thing, versus like, I mean, if you're adding the mother to it, then it's like, oh well, no, like, because I'm assuming that he's had to live with this for a long time, that might have not had the best childhood and stuff growing up. It's like, okay, that's like a little too much. Like, I don't know, it's more interesting if it's like, oh no, he actually comes from a loving home, like, it's not like you were saying, like some caricature of like, oh yeah, the killer must have like come from a house where the mother just badgered him all the time, and like of course he's lashing out. Like, yeah, it's strange.
Yeah, but one of the first moments that made me laugh was, I think there's already a couple before this, but I'm not going to remember them all. There's no way I'm going to remember them all. But so Laurie shows up at the gas station where these teenagers are picking on Corey, and they've pushed him down, and Laurie comes in and tells them to piss off, basically.
And they, before they're asking him to buy him some beer, and he says no, and when he says no, that's when they're like, hey, we know you're like that child killer, and then they start making fun of him, and he gets so angry he's holding this like glass bottle of milk, and he squeezes it, and it like cuts his hand.
Yeah, I think that's like also because the idea of drinking milk seems like a fairly innocent thing to do. Yeah, right. It's almost like a child quality to it.
Well, it's kind of interesting if like in the opening scene he was like 21, which like you could kind of see as maybe like an age where you kind of transition to manhood a little bit. Like, you can drink now. That's a very adult thing to do. And he even kind of like picks up a beer in the fridge when he's at babysitting, and then it's like, nah, I'll go for the milk. And then if you look at that angle, and then this accident happens, and then it kind of causes him to have this like arrested development. Like,
that's interesting, actually. Yeah, and in the opening scene, he considers taking a beer out of the fridge, but doesn't. It's almost like he's like, oh, should I be more like, or pretend to be more grown up? It's like, nah, not really. I'm innocent still. But then afterwards, it's almost like you could maybe argue it represents that he's trying to like pretend that he's still innocent. Yeah. But in reality, his life has changed too much to be that. Yeah. Maybe that's reading too much into his drinking choices, but
I mean, I think there's something there because it does feel very deliberate.
Like, yeah. Because not only do you see him pick it out, there's like a shot of him picking the chocolate milk out the fridge. They comment on it in the scene as well. Yeah. But they push him down after he like smashes the glass in his hand, and so it doesn't hurt them, he just hurts himself out of anger. And Laurie comes in and tells him to piss off, and they kind of insult her as well, saying she's a freak show as well. And
again, I don't know why.
I guess she got a reputation because she was like this hermit who like had her own shooting range and was collecting all sorts of weaponry. Maybe got a bit of a reputation in town. That's what I'm saying. She was promiscuous. No, very much a reputation of she's a nut job and might shoot you, kind of thing. But she takes him to the hospital, which is where her granddaughter Allison is now working. Allison is now a nurse, and she is she's got the head doctor is a complete dick to her. There's another nurse there who's a bit of a ditzy character, who the second I saw her interact with the head doctor, I'm like, they're having an affair. It's clear as day. Allison thinks she's up for a promotion, which goes to the slutty one, and that's just so we'll get into that stuff separately. But the moment that made me laugh was, so Laurie brings him in to get his hand fixed that he's cut with the glass, and you can tell she's kind of trying to make a bit of a setup. Like she wants Allison to meet him because she thinks he's a nice boy, and maybe in some way because he suffered this tragedy, even though it's different to hers, she sympathizes with him, and maybe because she's treated like a pariah by the town that she wants to help him. But the moment, because I thought Allison might resist and be like, oh, you're trying to set me up, this is what are you doing? But instead, the second Allison looks at him, she has this look of like, Mr. Dreamboat. She's so into him.
What? All right, so maybe this might be a little controversial, but I will say that I am actually kind of into the romance, but I do agree that it's not set up very well. Like, I like when it does get more into, like, I don't know, the fact that they're these kind of like doomed lovers. Like, it is very melodramatic, but it kind of works for me. But yeah, I do think maybe you need a little something more than just like instantly being like, love him, like, because yeah, it is like she looks at him and you could say you know, as like a nurse, like she might have that, you know, like Florence Nightingale syndrome or something, where you know, sometimes you're a nurse, you're caring for someone or whatever, and there's an attraction there, like, sure, whatever. But again, it does feel like this like deep love or whatever. But
I also thought it was weird the movie never kind of, because this is quite interesting, the idea that Laurie and her granddaughter, who are survivors of the shape of Michael Myers, are attracted in different ways. Laurie is like a grandmother who's like, oh, well, he's a nice boy, let me set him up with my granddaughter. And then Allison literally attracted to him as a partner. Like, surely there's something to say about the idea that they are drawn to someone who has already started a transformation into being the monster that they have, you know, lived through.
Sure, yeah.
You know, and maybe, yeah, you could argue that Laurie recognizing he needs help and reaching out is her kind of like, you know, she is this positive force in the world that is trying to stop this kind of evil from continuing to spread. Not that she necessarily recognized it right away, but that at least here she's trying to help him because, you know, they are one of the few characters who could sympathize with what he's going through.
Yeah.
That's all fine. It's just that the actual, like, the instant attraction just feels a bit forced. And the way Allison kind of, like, pursues him feels very aggressive in a way that feels like, why are you, like, you just met him once and you're, like, you know, chasing him down to talk to him and, you know.
And he does feel like a weird, awkward guy, and not like in a charming way that you might see in like a comedy or something, like in a, like, ooh, this guy seems like disturbed kind of way.
I mean, it comes off a little, like, sad, like he needs someone to help him kind of way. Maybe that's part of the appeal, like, oh, like, I can help fix him kind of thing. There's maybe a little bit of that there. And because, you know, what happened was an accident and it is this traumatic thing, and everyone obviously wants to blame him for this kid's death, but, like, yeah, what about like, it's not his fault really, and the fact that it happened is, you know, I mean, part of it's on the kid. Like, he's trying to kick down the door and you're standing right behind the door. Yeah, let's be honest, the kid, you know, he's kind of at fault here. Sure. Like, this is like your dog or cat would know to move out of the way when they hear that noise.
Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of sets up the romance stuff and gets that going, which, you know, I actually do think, like, this idea of attraction between the person who could become the next shape and a victim of the shape is actually quite interesting, and maybe that's partly why that attraction is there, is because there's some kind of like fire or spark that's ignited with that.
Oh, also they're both just really good looking, so
there is that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's a movie. Yeah.
I mean, if her choices are him or that like 40-year-old cop she went on a few dates with,
there's a cop who apparently has the same surname as the characters in the flashback in the last movie, who, like, pointed out what their name was and then never showed up in the movie. Apparently that cop's like their son or something.
Very tight scripts there, just like full of
full Easter eggs. No, so he sort of like has been on a date with her, and she's clearly doesn't want anything to do with him, but he keeps kind of trying to talk to her. But yeah, he does seem like at least 10 years older, maybe 15. You know, it's kind of a weird age gap. So we have to talk. So but we're move away from the romance. I think we have to talk about the character of Corey, how he starts his transition, and what the ins and outs of that are, and what was some of the better things about it, and what are some of the worst things about it.
Okay.
So I guess like, he goes to a Halloween party with Allison. And notably he's wearing a mask. He's not wearing a Michael Myers mask, he's wearing like a plastic scarecrow mask. But it's kind of like, hey, it's another bit of foreshadowing that he's wearing a mask. And he literally, and I think visually this is actually quite good if you're because I was already getting the sense that this is what they're going to do with the movie, is that he's going to become the new Michael Myers. But this idea that he's given a drink at one point and he has to pick up the mask to take the drink, but he only does it, he doesn't just take it off, he just sort of holds it up halfway. But then he starts to get into it and he starts dancing and he's enjoying himself, and just as he's starting to have a good time and loosen up, he runs into the mother of the kid that died, and she grills him out and is like, you're happy, you're having a good time while my son is dead. And
I think there's a lot going on in this scene, and it's super interesting because like you can tell that he has so much guilt, and like the way it's affected his life is he has just kind of closed himself off from everybody, and that like he doesn't go out because like right after the scene he has this confrontation with Allison, and he says like, this is why I don't go out. So it's like you get a lot from this character saying like, oh okay, yeah, he, because of what happened, which very understandably, like, yeah, he doesn't want to interact with the world, like, from his own guilt. And then also, yeah, you don't want people yelling at you like this, or to the chance to, since it is a small town, to run into the mother. So I actually thought this was a pretty affecting scene. And then it is interesting to see him like finally let loose and like actually have a good time. And I actually think, again, I think it's a very good kudos to this actor, who I think pulled a lot of this off really well, where like, you can see him being very buttoned up at first and then slowly loosening up to the point where he's doing like this crazy dance on the floor and he's on the ground, and like it's I thought it was like, yeah, really well done.
Yeah, and I suppose going back to what I said earlier about how the mother's this awful, like, I think even if what I'm about to say is true, I still think she's overwritten to be awful, because she's just like a caricature of being awful. But if you go back
Corey's
to
mother, right?
Yeah, Corey's mother,
not the mother of the dead kid.
But if you go to the idea of like Corey's mother is this really negative force in his life that's pushing him down a dark path because she's not being sympathetic and she's trying to control him.
They literally like say the words dark path like multiple times in the film,
which I wish they didn't. It's still on the nose.
And that feels like episode 3 stuff. Like
but but his father figure character, he is positive. He gives him that new motorbike at the start, so that instead of being mad at him that he's late for his work again on the bike because he's got a bicycle to start with, he says, "Look here's a motorbike," and he's happy to get. He's like, "Hey, maybe now you'll be on time." And so instead of just grilling him out, he's like, I'm helping you. I'm trying to improve things. I'm trying to be a supportive person. Yeah, I think equally.
And that's just to kind of tack onto that. That's like another instance of like having this kind of like Arrested Development thing where it's like, he was just riding a bicycle. Like that's a kid's thing.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point.
And then finally now he's riding a motorcycle. He's drinking beer. Like he's trying to grow up and get past this thing.
Yeah. But like those, his two parent figures, the parents of the kid also are this yin and yang, because the mother grills him out and hates him for who he is and blames him. But we get a scene later with the father of the dead kid, and he's like, no, like, I didn't hate him when I looked at him. Like, I understand that this was an accident, and I don't like... Like, he talks about how he would see others in the town getting angry at him, and he would say, wait, why are you taking my grief and my pain and making it about you so that you can be outraged and upset? This is my pain to go through, not yours. That's actually a very good thematic little thing to put in there.
Yeah. This movie is so strange because you have something like this character feels so like poignant and interesting, and it's like, oh, like this is a very interesting take. But then you have the mother character, which is like, what is this weird over the top character?
Yeah, she's a cartoon.
Yeah, so it's a very weird mishmash of like stuff like that.
It's a lot of good ideas, just with a lot of like cartoony execution of various parts of it, which is a shame, because you could sort of argue that forgetting because I think the problem that he gets killed and then it becomes about Michael again is the big problem. Assuming it's going to end with him being left as a new shape or whatever, like it can be this tragedy of there's good forces in his life and there's negative forces, and the negative forces are going to win because too many people are being mean and they're not having enough empathy, and you could really talk about how society's pushed them to this in a much better way than that whole like crowd mob end up killing the guy in the last movie. So it's a shame that...
But luckily they learned their lesson and they're not going to do any big crowd forms of vigilante justice ever again.
Oh god. More on that later. So anyway, he gets upset about this and he storms out of this Halloween party. Corey leaves this Halloween party and Alison chases him out and he yells at her, "This is why I don't go out, and leave me alone, I'm a loner, blah blah blah." And he's walking home on his own, and the group of teenagers who were, giving him shit earlier, and because Laurie, and it's kind of a funny moment where Laurie's like, "Yeah, this slashed the tires," kind of thing. But they blame him from that, obviously, and they find him on the bridge, and they're sort of pushing him around. The main bully's kind of saying, "Hey, I want to apologize," but it's clearly fake. He clearly wants to just aggravate him and sort of lull him into a false insecurity. And you can... It's
almost like that, like, it's almost even like jerkier kind of move where like, instead of just outright bullying someone, when you're like, shake my hand, like, there's something about this like extra like skeevy or whatever, just because it's like this false like nicety to it.
Yeah, because they're kind of surrounding him. And to be fair, again, going with this yin and yang and like dichotomy of like good forces and bad forces, there's actually at least one of the 14s who, once it starts to escalate into a possible fight, starts saying, "Hey, what are you guys doing? Let's stop this right now." She tries to talk some sense into them, but obviously they're on a bridge. Like, he's going over, right? That's what you feel the whole time.
So I mean, I gotta admit, when I first watched it, my first instinct was, oh, he's gonna accidentally throw a kid over.
Oh, sure. You thought he was going to throw, which would be the same thing again. He's throwing someone over a ledge. Yeah.
So it is actually, I thought I was actually taken for a nice little surprise. I was like, oh no, he's going over.
Yeah, he goes over, and this is where we have to mention there's a brief moment earlier in the film where it's just like, because like the opening happens and the Halloween theme kicks in for the opening titles, which I actually quite liked. It was like a very old school blue font, and the pumpkin thing this time is that the pumpkin kept being sort of like broken apart and a new pumpkin would replace it. It was kind of a cool visual.
I liked it, yeah.
But there's this sort of like, but there's very little of the Halloween music after that for a while, because it's like it only ever gets used when Michael's about, right? Because for the most part, it's new and it's good music. It's John Carpenter and Cole doing the music. But there's a moment early on where there's kind of like this implication where it looks at a homeless man, and then there's like a sort of shot of like a sewer entrance, and it's the circle of darkness, and the camera just lingers and tracks in a little bit, and it's basically saying, he's hiding in there. And this is where the bridge is. The bridge, Corey's went over the bridge, and this is the sad part of this, is that it's kind of a funny and not a good way scene where he just starts, he gets dragged off camera, and then you see him getting dragged into the sewer tunnel, and it's like, this looks really silly and goofy. And from there, like, he wakes up in the tunnel and he walks into Michael. Michael Myers is there, and he grabs him by the neck. And this is the sad part. And I was willing to forgive this, because I really did think for a lot of the movie that all of these scenes, Michael wasn't really there. I really genuinely thought that this was all in Corey's head, and it's more representing that the evil of Michael is passed on to him, and it's just sort of it's gestating and it's formulating throughout the movie. The fact that it turns out to be real the entire time really bugs me about this, because Michael grabs him by the neck and he's holding him, but he looks into his eyes. He looks into Corey's eyes, and when he does that, we get all these quick flashes of his life, as if Michael's like seeing his life. Yeah. And this is just silly. This is like bullshit nonsense. And Michael lets him go. For the first time in the franchise, Michael lets the character go, because maybe he recognizes the evil in him. And, so like, in hindsight, this was silly again, because, this is real. Michael's actually there. And the next scene with Michael is even worse. And I'll talk about that. But
yeah, I don't mind this idea. It actually reminds me a lot of like It. Like, you have this like creature living in a sewer that even like Michael Myers, you can call the shape, and like it is like this creature that can change shapes and stuff, and like people kind of like get lured there. So there's an interesting idea there, and what I thought the movie was gonna be, which I think might have been cool or more interesting, is that he was gonna stay in the sewer, and then like Corey was gonna like lead like all the people that he wanted to kill like to this place somehow, and Michael would take care of them there. Which, I mean, I don't know if he can sustain a whole movie for that, but I thought that would be interesting, and he only really ends up doing it once. But
like, I'm okay with the idea of Michael. I mean, I prefer he wasn't there at all and it was all in his head, but I wouldn't mind the idea of Michael letting him go because he recognizes he's a new shape. Yeah. But the problem is that,
hey man, we're the same. What's up?
The problem is the quick flashes, like, because it's like he's psychically seeing everything. It's this like supernatural moment that I just don't like.
It's very strange. I was liking it to the Ghost Rider penance stare. If anyone reads Ghost Rider, very similar to that.
Yeah, and because when he's leaving the sewer, the homeless man that's there sort of comes up and tries to attack him and starts yelling that he's Michael Myers. Yeah. And Corey ends up stabbing him, and it's kind of accidental because it's the homeless guy's got the knife, and he kind of like defends himself and kills him, and he leaves there. The next scene with Michael, though, I really hated, is that this is the one scene that he does lure someone back. The asshole cop guy who's into Allison that kind of confronted him at a restaurant. He lures the cop to this sewer area and brings him inside and holds him down for Michael to stab him, right? And the Halloween theme kicks in. What's so silly about this scene is that the idea is that Michael is weak and he's struggling to move. He can only really use one arm. As he's stabbing him, he starts to get stronger. It's like he's Superman getting energy from the yellow sun. He starts to get stronger and stand up straight as he's doing it. Like this is giving him. It felt. It was Hellraiser. This was Frank getting like life force from victims that Julia, whatever her name was bringing back to the house.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I guess if you want to be fair about it or whatever, like they did say in Halloween Kills that like when he kills, he transcends. So like, but I mean that was both a plot line we both thought was
that was a terrible in a dialogue.
But yeah, you can see the more he starts to kill, the stronger he gets, and then I think it even works with Corey too. Like he has a cut in his hand, and then after he kills and kind of takes a bandage off, it's like oh, it feels better.
That's why evil is so tempting and consuming, is because it does actually protect you in a weird way or something.
Great message. Kill people, become stronger.
Well, no, I think it's saying that's why it's tempting, but you shouldn't give in to the temptation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is the point I was making.
Oh, good.
Anyway,
Make sure not to do that.
After the homeless man scene, though, we get this hilarious scene where, if you didn't get what the movie was doing at this point, Laurie looks out of her window and sees Corey standing like sort of like just to the left of like a hedge, kind of like in the original movie how Michael was standing there. And then when she goes outside to ask why he's there, and Allison comes out to see her, there's a moment where he walks past Laurie and it goes into slow motion, and she's like watching him in slow motion with her eyes, like she recognizes the shape in his eyes. Like you know, it kind of goes back to what Loomis said in the first movie about the deep dark. You know, there's nothing in those eyes, kind of thing. It kind of starts to have that quality as the movie's going on. I think my problem, like I like the general idea of this. The problem was one, it feels goofy in the moment because it feels like Laurie goes from nothing to I see Michael Myers in his eyes. Like it's such a leap for characters in universe to just sort of say, "Oh, the evil's been reborn in him," or you know, whatever. I mean, they don't think it's been reborn; they just think that he might be evil like him. But
also, like, I don't know, no offense, Laurie. Like, I like the character, but I do feel like she does kind of a terrible job of like, you know, if she senses this in him, instead of trying to like sit down and talk to everyone very calmly and like, you know, try to lead him down to the right path, like, you know, she's instantly like, stay away from my daughter, like you can't have her, you're on a dark path, like screw you, like,
which is especially weird because she's the one that's trying to set them up in the first place. So it felt like a complete 180 for what was basically just a hunch, more than anything else. But no, they're hitting it off, Allison and Corey, even though it's, you know, he takes her to the house where the kid died, it's abandoned now, and is like talking about how it happened, and he's like, he's confessing how he feels to her. And it's kind of showing that she also has this darkness in her because she's like sort of dealing with the death of her mother and how the town treats her, and she's being bullied by her boss and not taken seriously. And that, you know, so because at the end of the movie, she's been saying she doesn't want to leave Haddonfield because she got too many memories here. She does actually end up doing what they were going to do together, which is leave the town. And I think for her, that's like, okay, the new start's what she needs as an adult. That's what she needs to actually grow and be better and be healthy. But there's just enough goofy ass scenes. But there's one. This is not that bad, but there's a scene with Laurie earlier on when she's like still pro dating Corey, and she gives some sort of speech about shouting up to the gods and wanting to show your tits.
Yeah. So he says something like, "Oh, like you want to find someone that just makes you want to like rip your shirt off and show your tits," and it's like, I don't know. I know that like she's grown a lot since the first film and everything, but that does not feel like Laurie to me.
It feels like Jamie Lee Curtis. It doesn't feel like Laurie's.
Sure, yeah.
Well, because Jamie Lee Curtis has got a,
it feels like Dana McBride, honestly.
Oh, true. Yeah, that's actually a very fair point given who's involved with this movie. So, I mean, damn, like. From here, like I think it's one stupid little moment as well. Just while I'm thinking about it, is after the party scene when she has the fight with Corey, Allison's at home and she's like beating up the microwave because it won't turn on, which is a really silly little moment because it's not that it's not working because Laurie walks up and presses the start button and it starts, so she's just forgotten how to use a microwave. It's a stupid little thing. But like you can show her getting frustrated easily without her making her look like she's forgotten a basic, function. which is pushing one button. Oh dear.
I like that scene. Microwaves can be tough.
So yeah, he lures the cop back and he gets killed by Michael. Next on his list, or at least next we're introduced to like, the radio like disc jockey guy who keeps spreading like all sorts of rumors and lies and basically exploiting anyone who's been involved with these tragedies.
Yeah, he's like talking about like conspiracy theories and stuff. And one thing that I think is kind of interesting, I haven't like dissected it a ton yet, but I don't know if you remember like early on when we're hearing like news about the movie that like I think the director said like, yeah, there's gonna be like a time jump and it's gonna be like in present day and we're gonna deal with modern stuff like COVID. Like I don't know if you remember them saying that.
I don't remember the COVID part, but I definitely remember the time jump part.
Yeah, but I remember they specifically said they were going to address issues like that, which thankfully the movie doesn't address that stuff, which is nice.
Yeah.
But I do think there's interesting comparisons you can make to like the fact that like you know, so many people in the town are like so hostile and like looking for, you know, like the person says like, oh yeah, Michael Myers disappeared, so they're looking for a new boogeyman. Like I feel like you can easily relate that to like, you know, on the early days in the pandemic when people were like looking for like, oh, who do we blame for this? And you know, there's, you know, some very you know, asshole people that would like, you know, blame like other countries and stuff for it. But that made me think of like the assholes in here. They're like blaming Lori and stuff. And then also if you like, that was something that the DJ kind of reminded me of, because he has like these kind of conspiracy theories where he's saying like, oh, Michael Myers was never one guy, like, you know, one guy couldn't do all that, which is a very valid point, but it just reminds me of like these conspiracy theorists that like, you know, spread misinformation and stuff online. And just a point as
no like I think that's there. This is like one of the characters that when he goes full killer he's going to come back and kill later on. The next actual victims though are the shithead doctor and the nurse that's sort of taking the promotion. You know, they're back at his place and he's kind of rich and she's like, oh, you've bought me things, that's all I want from you. And like, you know, like she goes to get changed, she comes back out and like Corey's already there and he's wearing his scarecrow mask and he's killing the doctor.
Which I thought was like a good visual, like it's a good like slasher mask. And
yeah, that's his baby mask before, in the same way that Michael had the clown mask as a kid, you know, before he upgraded. And
I'm glad that they like, I feel like other movies would have like actually had him wearing a clown mask as like a dumb Easter egg. Like I'm glad that they did something different.
Yeah, it would have been too on the nose, I think. But and then, you know, and there's something here that does imply that Michael's real, but again, I still kind of thought that maybe this was just playing tricks on us to think, you know, to make us think that Michael's there helping him kill all these characters, but maybe you know, it's all in his head. But you know, she's inside. Corey can't get in. She's trying to phone the police, and that's when Michael pops up inside the house and kills her. And he does the classic, you know, stab to the wall and turn his head looking at her thing. Yeah. Which, you know, fine, whatever. And the scene's, you know, solid enough, and it's kind of mixing the new themes for the new character with the Halloween theme when Michael pops in. You know, it's a nice cacophony of things.
Yeah, and even if you like, you know, obviously, you know, this is real, but like, yeah, even if he didn't have like the idea that it might be in his head or whatever, I do think it is interesting to, you know, see him like, you know, working. I mean, maybe it might be a little bit of a stretch to say like teaming up or working with someone, but to see like, you know, two killers like kind of going after these people at the same time, like, you know, again, that's just something that we haven't really seen in the series before. Yeah. It's interesting.
And if you take it as Michael is there, which the movie ultimately it says is, then it's like, oh, he's got a protege. Which is kind of weird, but you know, it's an interesting concept. And you know, during this, Laurie's getting really paranoid, and that's when she goes to confront his mother, and you know, that, you know, maybe he's dangerous, and he's telling Allison that we need to leave. You know, let's meet tonight at 9 o'clock, and it was Halloween at this point. But so the big thing though is that he goes into the sewer eventually, and when's this?
Beats up Michael.
He beats up Michael. Yeah, he actually beats up Michael and takes his mask. And again, I thought this, like, in my head, I was like, okay, I don't think Michael's really here, but the mask is there. Yeah. He does get the mask. You know, the mask is sitting there.
I feel like I've seen a lot of people online very upset about this scene. I think it's a little bit much to be like, I liked it, but again, it's something that I thought was like interesting because it's like, oh, again, like I haven't seen it before, and I like that there was this kind of like frantic struggle to it. Like it's not like he like sucker punches them and he falls down the floor. It's like they are like you know, kind of like grappling and going back and forth. And I like the shot, the way it's shot as well, because like all kind of from like the sewer entrance, and you kind of see him going like back and forth. Like, I thought it looked cool.
Bit of silhouette. Michael still sits up at the end with his mask off though, and sort of does the head tilt.
Yeah. I could have lived without that.
Yeah, it just kind of felt like, I don't know, like you could argue that the reason why he's stronger than Michael right now is because he's starting to like gain more power by killing, which is kind of what the movie's implying to a certain degree. But it's after this that, you know, he goes after the kids that have been bullying him, right? You know, he's got the mask now. He lures them to the junkyard where he works, and he kills them. You know, and even gets his parental figure killed because he doesn't kill him himself, but you know he ducks when the other guy goes to shoot him, and he gets hit.
This is another scene where it's like, okay, logically, like it doesn't really make sense, but I thought it looked very cool. Like you have Corey kind of in the background here, and then the main bully kid has a gun. He's about to shoot him, and then the father figure stands up. He's like, no, wait, and then he gets shot. And then when he falls down, like Corey's disappeared. Like obviously, it doesn't make any sense that you wouldn't see him run away, but I think it's a very cool visual. I like that scene.
And there's maybe something to be said with, you know, this father figure was actually trying to help him throughout the movie, and it's this sad ending for him that ultimately he takes a bullet for him, and he's taking a bullet for this guy who is now too far gone, who's now is now down the deep end of doing other things.
Yeah.
But you know, he kills these kids, and it's like he has become the new Shape, and he goes after the radio DJ guy, and
I do like the kill when the main kid, he's like going after with a blowtorch, which you don't like see. It's not in like
it's in the foreground. You just see like the flame in his mouth, but it's like out of focus. Yeah,
it's cool.
Yeah, actually, the DJ kill may be the most memorable kill as far as just visceral gore goes, because he bashes his face into like the desk or whatever a bunch of times, but when he brings up his face again after he's bashed it, like his jaw's kind of missing. It's just been obliterated, and his tongue's just kind of hanging. And then Corey, as the Shape, decides to just sort of like slice off his tongue, and you see it. You see the tongue get sliced off, and the blood starts pouring out. It's pretty gnarly.
And it falls onto the record that's like playing, and it's like spinning around and skipping the record, which is funny.
Yeah. That does feel a bit less Halloween and a bit more like Jason.
Sure.
To have that comedy moment at the end of the scene.
That's true, yeah.
That was funny. Like that wasn't scary, it was funny.
Yeah.
But you have like that, you have all this going. And so at this point, I'm like, okay, there's been a lot of silly elements to this, there's been a lot of silly characters and stuff, some stuff's been heavy-handed, but I kind of like the idea of a transition of like the idea that the evil that is inside the Shape is always going to be in someone new, and it kind of fits as a metaphor for real life, and there's always going to be some evil people to some extent, and you have to be aware of it, you have to try and protect against it and all that stuff. But then we go to Laurie, who, because she's tried to talk Allison out of like being with Corey, Allison stormed off and said she's leaving with a bag. And
well, before that, he does kill his mom.
You're right. He goes to his house and kills his mom. That's right. Yeah. I forgot to mention that.
That one, honestly, though, it's kind of a forgettable scene. Like I think he just stabs her. It's not really.
Yeah, there's not much to it. Yeah. Because Allison's left, Laurie like starts acting. Now, admittedly, this was in the trailer and I'd forgotten about it. But for a second, I was thinking, I don't really buy that Laurie would get suicidal. But to be fair, she isn't really. It's all a ploy. She says, she phones the police and says, I want to report a suicide, and she takes out a gun. She's about to blow her brains out. But it turns out that she has a sixth sense for when the Shape is going to attack, because then when Corey comes into the room, she's standing waiting and says, you didn't think I'd kill myself, did you? And shoots him.
Very strange scene.
Yeah, she shoots him a couple of times. He falls down the stairs. The mask comes off and it's Corey, and he's coughing up blood. So she's basically already beat Corey. Corey's kind of done. And I get that the message of like the evil passing on and this like leading to this tragedy for this character can still work with him not making it through to like the end of the movie. But it's still, I think the problem is for me, the movie's about him. So with his, you know, if he's going to die and that's the end of the movie, that's fine. But this is not the end of the movie. We have another 15 minutes of Michael showing up, taking his mask back, and fighting Laurie in the kitchen. And
so bizarre.
And it's this over the top fight scene where, you know, she sort of pins one of his hands with a knife and then a second hand, and then eventually, like, you know,
it's actually, she's like on top of him, which it actually seems kind of like weirdly sexual, which it's kind of like funny, 'cause, like she's like on top of him straddling and then stabbing him, which is like penetrating him, like it's
yeah. And she's basically done killing him, but then his hand like just rips through the knife and like grabs her by the throat, but then eventually kind of Allison shows up at the last second, realizing that she might be in trouble and helps her.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, there's nice ideas in here that the good people and good influences need to be, like, we need more good influences. We need people to be good to each other. We need people to encourage each other and look out for each other. And you could argue that this movie, in many ways, is about helping someone who could go down a dark path by recognizing their trauma or their mental illness or whatever it is. To get serious for a second, I think this is kind of like almost talking about something like a mass shooter and saying,
oh sure, yeah,
the solution to this is helping them before they get to that point, and sort of trying to help people before they become that. But this is the sad story of someone who ultimately is still going to go down the dark path. There's a lot of good ideas in there. There's a lot of good things you could say with that metaphor or with that allegory. But then it just becomes a bit Michael versus Laurie and this big over the top fight, which
it's strange.
Not only ends with like Laurie finally winning, but then when the sheriff from the last movie, the sheriff from the first 2018 movie shows up, and because one of the cops saying this is not how we do things, and the black sheriff from 2018 with his cowboy hat shows up and is like, it is tonight. So we basically get this mob going with them to the junkyard again, back to the sort of the car junkyard that
Corey worked at,
and they've got Michael strapped to the top of the car like they're going on vacation and he's their luggage. And then they get to the junkyard and they pass him, the crowd of people pass him like he's Jesus over their head to the big what do you call it, the muncher, the big car muncher.
I don't know the technical term,
and they put him in the and you see Michael's body get sucked in with the gears and munched. He's basically turned into soup. Like he's gone, he's dead. And it's this big ending where the town's got their revenge on me. They finally got him. And part of me thought, the rest of the movie wasn't about this.
Right, no, it's
the rest of the movie was not about Laurie versus Michael, and it was definitely not about the town getting closure necessarily. I mean, it was brought up that Corey was victimized by the town in the way he was to a large extent because they needed to blame someone. But I just
honestly, this should have been the way Halloween Kills ended, and then you just pick up with the Corey storyline in this one.
Yeah, absolutely. This would have worked better as the ending to the last movie. Absolutely. And then so we get this big ridiculous scene with music playing as he dies, and then we cut ahead to Laurie finishing her book talking about how the evil doesn't die, it just changes shape. And it's like, okay, that's a good line given that he's called the Shape, right? Not in universe, but it's a nice reference to it.
It's a little Easter eggy, I guess, but it's fine. I didn't mind it.
And it's like, okay,
what'd you think about when she gets stabbed with the knitting needle?
A little funny, because they mentioned early on, someone says, "Oh, I heard your grandmother stabbed Michael Myers with a knitting needle." So her picking it up, it was, I think, because they'd already went through everything they could reference in the first two movies. There wasn't as much of it in this one, so that one didn't bother me too much. But it's kind of like a wink, wink. We're doing that again. What actually bothered me way more than that is that when just as she's about to kill Michael, you get this sort of quick montage of the first movie,
right?
With the music ramping up as if this is big epic moment. She's finally going to kill him after all this time, and she's going to get killed by him as well. She's even saying, "Yeah, do it, Michael, do it." And maybe they're going to do that. That's the thing. They've already done this. Halloween Resurrection started with them dying together. Right?
That's true. Yeah.
And Michael didn't really die, but she thought like he was. So they've kind of done that before already. The end of the movie is Allison's left, and Laurie decides to go out and start dating the sheriff. He wants to take her to Japan to visit some what trees?
Cherry blossoms.
Cherry blossoms. That's what it was. Yes.
Very typical ending. Except you get one last little shot inside the house, and then what do you see on her desk? The mask.
Yes. I think it's the last shot. I think the last shot's them in the porch. You just see that sort of.
No, because it's them on the porch, and then it cuts to inside the house, and then it shows a couple of different rooms, and you see some of the damage, and then the very last thing you see is her office desk area.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen it twice, so I'll believe you.
I could be wrong,
but I don't think that's implying anything with Laurie. I think that's just sort of saying
it's going to be the new Shape.
I think it's just saying the evil's always going to exist in some form. It'll change, but it's always going to be there.
Did you see? I think there was a news story going around or something where Jamie Lee Curtis actually signed a contract stating that she will never be in a Halloween film again.
I did not, but that's funny. I mean, she shouldn't be. She's been enough at this point.
You're good.
She's been back in a reboot and then been retconned out of that and rebooted again. Like, you know, we've done it all.
Yeah.
We've done it all twice. So that's fine. This is so frustrating because I feel like it became this, like, we have to make it about Laurie and Michael again at the end, when the movie presented me with a new character that, well, not every element of was working. It had like a very interesting new idea that I did at times quite like.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and like you end it with, you know, like the fight with Corey. I think maybe that fight is like super short. I think maybe you amp that up a little bit and maybe get Allison involved in that, and then like that's your ending. And even if you want to end it at that, but then like have maybe like one last shot of like
Michael picking up the mask.
Yeah, or something, like, fine, whatever. But yeah, just to have this like extra tacked on 10-15 minutes of like, you know, is a character that essentially was like not in the movie, not the focus of the movie.
Yeah, the last 15 minutes kind of feel like a sort of, to go back to Star Wars, I feel like like you know, maybe a few scenes towards the end of Rise of Skywalker or something, you know, where it's like, oh, here's just your fan service section to have your moments.
I mean, I could be wrong, but I would be willing to bet money that this was like something from a studio or a producer that was like, you know, like Jason Blum was like looking at this and was like, hey, where's Michael? This is a Halloween movie. They're like, you gotta have Michael in it. Like, you know. Yeah,
honestly, I think the ballsier move would have been to reveal that Michael was never in the movie at all. He was just in you know, Corey's head as he was sort of, you know, going down this path into becoming a new version of the Shape, and just, you know, do that and have it be more about him at the end. Obviously get Allison involved. Maybe the idea of him trying to kill Allison or succeeding in killing Allison would be the final confirmation of he has gone past the line. He is now the Shape. He is now he is nothing in him anymore.
And like everything nowadays is about franchises. Like that'd be a hell of a way to keep the franchise going. Like versus now, I don't know what you can do now unless you want to reboot.
It'd have to be rebooted again because like I would have been, you know, maybe not. I don't want David Gordon Green to be back, but like if you had gotten a new director and said, okay, now Corey's the Shape and he's going to be the killer in what the next movie is, like I'd be like, okay, I'll give that a shot. Like
I'd at least be a lot more interested than if they announced some remake or reboot or something.
Yeah, I think the idea that evil can pass on, or not even pass, like I don't even think that's fair to say. I don't think it passes on from Michael. I think it's just also in him. You know, like the idea that it's created out of this thing that happens. That's, you know, society. I mean, maybe it's a little bit like the Joker movie, and the society helps create this new Michael Myers.
Yeah.
But you know, I actually do think it has some things to say, which is nice. Yeah. And the last movie did too, but the last movie said them so horribly that it did not matter.
Yeah. It is strange.
Yeah, whereas this movie, it's more like, okay, no, I can actually see some of what you're trying to say. I think you ruin it by the end because you throw it out the window, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I'm coming out of this movie going, the worst part of this is that Michael's there, which is
strange
surreal.
To say. Yeah, movie,
it's surreal. You know, and the fact is though is that you cannot have Michael but have it, you know, still feel so impacted by him because he is kind of this influence of what evil is. And
well, I feel like this I feel like a lot of this trilogy has been wanting to look at how Michael has affected this town, and I feel like it's not done well in the first one because of them erasing all the continuity, that it doesn't really seem feasible that one night like 40 years ago, you know, affected the town this much. And then I feel like, you know, it's not done great in Kills because it's just like the mob vigilante aspect is just so overblown that it's just cheesy and not done well. And I feel like this is the first one that has interesting stuff to say about how, you know, it feels like Haddonfield is like poisoned and that it's being affected by this evil in this incident. Like this was the first time I actually bought into it. And I will actually say, I actually really enjoyed Haddonfield in this one. Like we get lots of different scenes. Like I liked being at like the bar and the diner and just like, you know, seeing them walking like on the streets and in the suburbs. Like I like the way it looked, and there's like a lot of like subtle things, you know, in the background. Like they have like missing posters up and stuff where you feel that sense of like, oh yeah, there is something going on in this town that maybe not everyone wants to talk about it. But like, yeah, you just sense like there is this trauma there. And actually, you know, you know, there's nothing more cliche or cheesy to say in the world that like, oh, like the location is the character or whatever. But I did really get like a a sense of Haddonfield in this one that I really liked.
And like I think this one is more focused than the last couple. I don't think it's jumbling too many characters. I think it's about this one character. For the vast majority of the movie, it is his story, and it's like hinting at things, it's teasing some things. Some of it's a bit too on the nose for sure, but at the very least, it's trying something different, and in a way that makes sense as well. It's not just some like ridiculously different thing that doesn't fit the franchise. Like Jason Goes to Hell is like the kind of the very, very bad version of this, or even five, because it is like another person with the mask on. This is actually like, no, this is going to be the story of the slow build to someone becoming the Shape. That is very fascinating. And also this idea that in the real world, like, killers kind of influence new killers. They do. That absolutely happens. So it's the best of the three new ones. It absolutely is. Because at least it's kind of its own thing up until the last 15-20 minutes where it has to just give in to all this franchise shit. I think Laurie is fine to be there because I think her sympathizing with this guy at first and then slowly kind of realizing, oh no, he might be something like what I thought before is an interesting angle. But I think her confronting Michael again at the end, and the funny thing is it's not even like Michael's only there for his mask. Like, he doesn't care about Laurie still. Laurie wasn't necessarily building up and gearing up to fight him, so she sensed that he might be popping up, and that's why she grabbed the gun and did the whole suicide attempt fake thing. But
honestly, I do kind of like the early Laurie in this, because the last two movies we had like crazy hermit Laurie, which I did not care for, but I like in this one that she is like, no, I'm a survivor and I am choosing to move past my trauma. I'm not letting it define me. And like, I'm taking Halloween back. Like, I'm celebrating Halloween. I actually thought like, okay, this is a good character development versus, the last ones, which is just like, again, just felt unrecognizable to me. But then, like as the movie goes on and then by the end, it's like she slips back into that character, which I don't like. They even have her like drinking again, which I thought was weird because like earlier they mentioned like, oh, like she got sober again. That's weird just to have her like just drinking at the end. Well,
of the movie. Think she only starts drinking again once she realizes that there's a new Shape. Once she realizes Corey, and I think it's when Allison's left, she starts drinking again. So
which I mean, that situation, like that'd be very tempting. But again, I think it'd be nice to show that she can overcome that. But
which again, they kind of did the alcohol thing in H2O.
Yep.
They did that with her already. So and even the idea that he's pinned down so she can kill him. Also, the end of H2O, kinda. So I mean,
and even like in that one too, like they had a definitive kill for him where it's like head chopping off, this one's even more extreme than that, like which like how do you get more extreme than like a head chopping off? But who knows. I say you find out in the next movie that like he quickly switched his body with someone else's. So it wasn't Michael Myers that was thrown in there.
I mean, it's always even though he didn't have his mask on, so that'd be very difficult to pull off. Very, very lots of interesting choices, but also some bad choices, which at least makes it as an interesting. I don't even want to say failure. I think it's interesting enough that I wouldn't call it a failure. I'd say it's a interesting film.
For sure. No, I agree. I mean, it's a mixed bag, definitely. I think the positive stuff does outweigh the negative stuff for me, but unfortunately the negative stuff does still weigh it down to keep it from being like something I'm truly excited and happy for.
It's the ending, where it switches back to Michael and Laurie. It's also the execution of a lot of things, like for example, when they're putting him into the grinder at the end, like there's a lot of slow motion. Like, the woman who survived from the last movie, like she's looking very intently. Everyone's looking like on, like, oh, this is it. We finally dealt with this monster, kind of thing. And that would have like almost made the Corey becoming the new Shape more effective if he was still alive, because it's like, they've dealt with this monster, but there's always going to be another one. But he's already dead, so they've already dealt with the next one too. So I don't know.
Strange, weird choices.
Yeah, some weird stuff, but. That's Halloween ends pretty much. I don't know if I've got more things that I want to talk about. There was definitely some other stupid little things that made me laugh throughout, with like the line delivery or like weird pauses after things or reactions. But as far as all the big stuff goes, like that is absolutely like everything, I think. Well, would you like to rate Halloween Ends?
Sure. So again, just to reiterate it, it is a bit of a mixed bag for me. There's a lot of stuff I like, and again, the stuff I like is generally the Corey story, which, again, very surprising to say that the stuff that is the least Halloween and well, I mean, it can still feel like Halloween, but like less Michael Myers-y. But yeah, it's this is a problem with just too many movies this day. Not to get on a soapbox, but it's just giving into this like fan service Easter egg bullshit where it's like you can't just let the movie stand on its own. It's like, no, we have to have this showdown between Michael and Laurie, and it's like, yeah, we don't need this, especially since like we've gotten it in like other movies already. And it sucks because it just feels like this truly could have been not a perfect movie, but something a lot more special if they were getting past that and just focusing on the new. And I'm sure it would have made fans upset and stuff, but hey, get over it. So again, I do think this one actually was shot pretty well. Like I think there was like a lot of just like camera work and just again the way Haddonfield looked and like some of the kill scenes and stuff. Like I was into it versus like Halloween Kills, which like the like that one was super violent and over the top, but it didn't feel like Halloween to me, and I didn't really like the kills in that. Versus this, which I actually did. And then even some of the cheesier stuff, like you were kind of saying, like some parts that were hammy, like honestly that stuff kind of worked for me. Like I'm not gonna say that it's not cheesy, but like I
was laughing, so at least there was some enjoyment.
It's getting a reaction, but
I don't know if it wanted me to laugh though is the problem.
I'm assuming not, but like so suffice it to say, with all of that though, I think I'm gonna give it a 6, which I'm like very surprised at, because I don't even remember what we gave the other ones, but they're so like
it was lower than that.
That much. But no, like I think this is, as it is, it's a surprisingly okay movie, given that it's a third part of a trilogy that I think is pretty bad. However, and that might not sound like a great compliment, but I think that this easily could have been, maybe not like an 8 or a 9, but like again, if you get rid of all that Michael stuff and then just focus on this new idea and this Corey stuff, like that easily could have bumped it up to like 7.5 or something for me, which is a shame.
That's true. I think there's a version of this idea of this movie that could be fantastic. There's a version of this movie that could be genuinely great. But as it is, I'm going to agree with 6.
Wow.
I think there's enough.
Very surprised.
It makes it worthwhile, even though there's a lot of things that don't. Another small moment is like right before she's going to kill Michael, Laurie holds up the butcher knife, and like the sort of CG'd on like reflection of Michael on the table, and it just looks so phony and forced that it takes you out of it because it feels so silly. I laughed during that moment. So that's what it is.
Very strange. It's just so weird to have stuff like that is laughably bad, like with this juxtaposition of like scenes that are legitimately interesting and well done, and that make you go like, oh, like this is cool. Like it's strange.
Also, as a special bonus, it wasn't just us two who saw the movie today, so
what?
Yes, Tara is here, and she will also give her rating of Halloween Ends.
It's a 6.
A woman of very few words, although notably that turned it into a 666, which is exciting in all of its own ways. But you can go ahead. Go. Bye, everyone. Say bye to Tara.
She's gonna go watch a sci-fi movie.
So there you go. That is our thoughts on Halloween Ends. I think it's the most interesting of the three. Obviously, it wasn't.
By a mile, yeah.
It wasn't as true because we didn't go 2 hours 40 minutes. Like there was so much wrong with that last movie. We went a ridiculous amount of time.
Yeah.
But that is Halloween Ends. That is the end of this trilogy, which has plagued us with different levels of discussion. So I will take this time to thank everyone for watching. Thank you for supporting all the content. Obviously, this is kind of a special episode because we're in person. But you can, of course, support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV.
Yeah, if you want to see us do more in-person episodes, really hike up those Patreon numbers.
Oh yeah, if the Patreon numbers go high enough, I'll come and record.
You can fly out once a month.
But that go to Patreon, you get bonus episodes, you get even more streams, which is a monthly bonus show where we talk about different horror movies that we've been watching that we didn't review on the show. You get to vote on things, all that sort of stuff. So go check out that. And you just saw Tara there. Go check out the Atomic Cinema Experiment, our sci-fi movie podcast. And coming soon to Mail Fuzz Movies is the Collector's Cut, a new show with myself and David, doing different movie franchises and themes that are not horror or sci-fi. They're just the rest. Well, they might be sometimes, but the rest of the movie genre spectrum. So check out all that. But otherwise, you could hit the super thanks button. You can like, you can subscribe, you can ding the bell for notifications. You can rate the podcast on iTunes, wherever you get your podcast from. But otherwise, I think that's us.
Did you thank the producers?
Tim,
you know who they are?
Tim, do you see a list of names on? This is not my computer.
I literally do see a list of names.
That's the IMDb page for Halloween Ends.
All right, well, now, yeah, you're being more specific.
Thank you to Jamie Lee Curtis. Thank you to Andi Matichak. Thank you to James Jude Courtney.
Okay, well, I shouldn't do this because of your attitude, but before we leave, since you are a guest in my country, I did get you a little present. As is custom for us USAers.
I have no idea what this is.
Oh, come on, you know what it is.
What? No, I don't.
You know what it is.
No, I don't. Okay. I'm opening this live on air. Oh, it's Halloween related. I see a Halloween thing. Oh, it's a Halloween action figure, which is about maybe an inch tall, maybe less.
It's the world's tiniest Michael Myers. From your favorite Halloween film.
It's Halloween 2 is not my favorite. What are you talking about?
Are you sure?
I'm going the wrong way. Oh, there we go. There we go. Halloween 2, Michael Myers, and Honey, I Shrunk the Kid size.
Now you can give me my present.
Thank you so very much, Tim. I'll do that off camera, Tim.
Okay. Oh, good. Okay.
It's too personal to reveal to the world on
That's
camera. I'll be honest. I was a little worried that it was going to be Leprechaun related, or possibly the boy related. Not that they sell boy merch. No one has boy merch.
Not yet.
There's
like one Leprechaun promotional action figure from like the 90s that's like going for thousands on eBay, but someday it will be mine.
Oh.
Another excuse to bump up those Patreon numbers.
But yes, thank you everyone for joining us. We appreciate it. We really do. The support is why I'm able to come here and do an in-person episode with Tim. Maybe there'll be more in the future someday.
Very fun. Yeah, or maybe I'll go to the Caribbean someday and visit you.
Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. Some Screams After Midnight. Keep watching scary movies. Goodbye. Peace.